Welcome to the Zocalo. It is Sunday morning. It is a beautiful summer Sunday morning at that, at least in Southern California, maybe not where you are. Anyway, yeah, we're here to talk all things Babylon 5. And, this week's topic really is going to be a little bit of a Zocalo, a little bit of everything in our grand marketplace. We're going to talk about things from, like little anachronisms, things that have been in our past that seem to exist in the future, and why. We're going to explore that. And does it fit? Is this a good thing? Does it make sense? We're going to talk about all of those things and what they are.
And science fiction is replete with using anachronisms in order to anchor humanity into the future. That's not necessarily a trademark to Babylon 5, but it is something that I think, and I want to use this in the right term, like responsible writers like Joe or like his writers would do, just to make sure that we don't lose touch with where we came from to where we are now in the setting of that story.
Sure, it definitely gives us something familiar to grasp onto and say, hey, I know what that is. That's in the future. Cool.
Exactly. So that's where I kind of wanted to go with the idea of this, because when you look at a science fiction show, you're thinking, why aren't they using just all electronics or holograms? Or, why is there a tree in a station? Or even in Babylon 5's case, why is an entire ring dedicated to providing the station with oxygen? Why isn't it just recycled? Why worry about writing anything down on paper when you can put something into their version of an iPad, or in this case, data crystals? Like, why would you even have paper? Why would you have candles? Things like that.
Indeed. Yeah. So that's what we're going to talk about. And we would love it if our viewers here chime in with their suggestions. Norm, you have your list and I have my list. We're going to go down those. And then if we're forgetting anything, and I'm sure we are, because there's so many of these, chime in and let's get it into the show. We have 57 minutes. So let's go.
So let's toast we always do a toast.
Let's do our toast.
To everyone who's joined us and who will join us later and who will watch this later on as it's hosted on YouTube. So Valtu
to you.
To you.
By the way, it is so good to be back. I had to take last week off because I was out of town visiting family. And you know what? My Sunday just wasn't the same.
Wait a second. Your cover story was working for Commander Ivanova.
Yo, we're not talking about that. I can't talk about that.
So your cover was you were doing things out of town with friends.
I was visiting my family. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Viva la resistance.
There. I totally blew Char's cover. Sorry. Or did I?
Norm, what are you doing? Shush.
I know.
I'm going to get killed after this.
Or at least stalked by a shadow agent, or perhaps like Home Guard or Night Watch or something.
I've got so much explaining to do now.
So
anyway,
John Bowersock says, thanks, John, for being here. He says, okay, Norm, next time we do Ask Me Anything 1 hour just wasn't long enough. We need to extend it to at least 30 or another hour. Yeah, that was a fun show. There was a lot of stuff that was discussed last week with the Ask Norm Anything show, and it ranged the gamut. It was a lot of fun, and yeah, we're going to definitely do it again.
I cannot wait to watch this. I have been just furiously trying to catch up since I got back into town, but I'm missing out on this right now, and I know that I'm missing good stuff because from what you told me, the interaction was up there as one of our best.
Oh yeah, it was. Well, we have fantastic viewers. We have fantastic fans they're all chiming in, and a bunch of different things. So it was like when you do an Ask Me Anything in AMA format, it's really kind of you got to be on your feet. You got to be one thing I wanted to talk about, Char, and we're going to do an entire show on this. And I don't know if this violates any YouTube advertising things. I don't think it will, but in any case, that's not my intent on this. But I wanted to show people.
Oh, hey, look at that. Look at that beautiful thing.
So I wanted to show people and let people know about Joe Michael Straczynski's Becoming Superman, his book.
You better be reading it. That's all I really have to say at this point.
Yeah, because it's truly an amazing read. I'm not too deep into it, but I want to get more into it this week. I usually listen to the audiobook when I'm working, and it's read by Peter Jurasik, which is unbelievable. believable. And I just want to let people know that in the audiobook format or in the Audible format, there is a special feature that is not in the book.
Ooh. Do you want to tell us
Right.
what it is, or do we have to get it?
I would love to, but it really kind of does spoil the laugh out loud belly chuckle that you will have.
Okay. Best not to spoil it. So what you're saying is get the audio version as well as the hardcover. You're going through the audio now. Can you say a little bit about where you are in your listening right now?
I have just finished the segment where, this is the one that really tore me up, literally and figuratively, because
I mean,
I don't want to spoil it for you, Charlotte, but
I think I'm a little further along than you are, so you're not spoiling anything.
All right, so I just got to the point where I think it's where Joe was. He saw a nun slip and fall when she was running.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I think that's around the same time where I think it was Casimir died, Casimir the First.
Right.
And how he said that the only time that people would, I guess, ever show up to an event that the Straczynskis would throw would be either at like a funeral or if they were serving good food or something to that effect.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. That's not giving away too much. And if you're not reading Straczynski's autobiography, what are you doing? I mean, after this show, go out and get yourself a copy. I'm reading the hardcover, and I'm at the part where he has just walked away from Ghostbusters.
Okay.
So we're talking mid 80s.
The real Ghostbusters.
The real Ghostbusters, yes.
Yeah.
So, it is not light reading. And we're going to discuss this in depth next week. So that buys you another week to get up to speed, finish the book.
Right.
You better be reading it. And you and I are going to dissect it. You'll take it from the audiobook angle because I've not listened to that yet. I do intend to, though. And then I'm going to tackle it from the hardcover edition. Yeah,
the one thing that's always going on in the back of my brain as Peter's reading it is I want him to like break out in voices.
Oh. Yeah, seriously though, he'd be good at it.
But that's just me. And I'm wondering if Andreas was alive, would he have read this book?
Ooh, you suppose they would have kind of tag teamed it?
It would have been interesting because one of the things that I really want to stress when people are reading this book and when they finish it is to rewatch or reread your favorite Joe work, whether it's comics, or whether it's his, the TV that he did back in the 1980s, or whether it's Babylon 5 or Sense8.
Oh, yes, Sense8. Yeah.
Rewatch that with this new perspective that you've learned about how he came to the decisions that he made to create these works.
Oh, yes, 100%. And you know what? I don't know if you're saying this because you've seen what I've seen on Twitter where people are saying they are going to do that. And I most definitely am, because I feel, even though I'm not done with the book, I understand so much more about why he has written the things he has and where he was coming from on that. And so then to relive it all again with this new perspective is going to give it a whole new take.
Yes, absolutely.
And my respect for Joe, I've always had a lot of respect for Joe. But after reading the brutal honesty and the things that he's gone through in his life that made him the man that he is, I don't know if I respect anybody more than him. And I mean, that's not a grandiose statement. Just, wow, dude. Wow.
Yeah,
but anyway, next week we'll get into this. I gotta restrain. I want to talk about it so bad. But we are here to talk about anachronisms. And I want to give a shout out to Terry Jones. Hello. Thank you for the compliments on my hair color. I just got that done yesterday.
Yes.
I'm channeling my inner Lita a little bit.
Absolutely. It's the right shade of red.
Yeah. I told my hairdresser, I want to go just a little bit orange and a little bit coppery. And she's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, do it. And I freaking love it. It's my favorite.
It's too bad that I can't do this a couple hours from now because I'm going to get my Sheridan haircut.
Ooh.
Today. So maybe next week.
Next week is what it's all about then.
That's right. It's all about Babylon 5 hair. Our next week's show. I'm just kidding.
Sorry, Straczynski, you get the way. We need to talk about hair. All right. So
where should we start?
Where should we? Yeah, there really is. Do we want to start with the big stuff, or do you just kind of want to go at complete random?
let's just go at complete random. I
Okay.
would like to read, kind of like set the tone for this and what I posted online about the thrust
Sure.
of this particular show. So I said, from the most advanced, gleaming, and streamlined space station to the smallest handheld communication device, we as science fiction fans marvel at the possibilities of how future will evolve and unfold. Our future will evolve and unfold. So why is, when an anachronism, like a book or a baseball cap or a pair of spectacles, when inserted into our future fantasies, do we really take notice of both why it is there in the future and how it makes us feel? So whether it's quill and ink, the hand-copied Book of Jaquan, or Garibaldi's 1992 Kawasaki Ninja ZX-11, or something as simple as, albeit illegal, a coffee plant that Ivanova conceals in the hydroponics garden, we as fans love seeing these anachronisms because they remind us that no matter how advanced we are as a race that we've become, there will always be elements of our past that tether us to our future and thusly provide a roadmap for where we were to where we are in the present.
Beautifully said.
I'm stealing so much like Joe Mojo when I write.
Hey, it's working. Don't stop.
Thank you.
Good
So
stuff.
yeah, so that's kind of like the tone of what we're doing today.
Yeah. All right. So do you have something that you want to discuss first? Because I've got something, but you are welcome to go ahead.
You know, just in terms of like blanketing the overall use of anachronisms, I think that in some way Joe is channeling that particular voice of his through Garibaldi, because Garibaldi has a lot of those examples in both my notes and your notes.
This is true. This is true. So shall we just focus on Garibaldi and his things first?
Sure. And I mentioned, you know, there was the motorcycle and, you know, the Kawasaki Ninja. That was the popular motorcycle of the time. Because remember, it's a 1992 motorcycle. Babylon 5 started in 1993, February of 93. So it would be the motorcycle of the era.
The motorcycle. Yeah. Now, okay. I don't have massive motorcycle knowledge. I didn't know what this thing was at the time, and I really still don't now. This one, I feel like, is a little bit on the rougher side of, are we really going to remember this in the future?
You know, it's here's how I kind of take all of this. It's like, take let's see. So Babylon 5 would be about what, 150 years in the future, like 2257.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can go with that.
So when we first see this, and I guess Garibaldi got it off of interstellar eBay, you know,
which is apparently a thing in the future,
right?
So put that out there.
You know, you look at 150 years in the past from now, you know, and that would be in the mid 1800s. And
nobody's got their antique wagons.
No, but people do have other things that are antique that are kind of, oh, and you know, I mean, like, people put together, not that they drive it around, but they'll put together like Model Ts. They'll put together those type of crank engine type of cars. You know, I think it's just one of those things where they were just poking fun at the fact that Michael Garibaldi might be going through a midlife crisis, and this is his midlife crisis idea.
You know what? I really like that rationalization. I'm going to go with that. Because really, starting season 1, he's already losing some hair.
Yeah.
So he's having kind of like that existential crisis. Oh my God, what am I doing with my life? And so it makes sense that this is his midlife crisis vehicle of choice. And they do futurize it a little bit. I mean, it's not a gas combustible engine. That's long gone. Mm-hmm. They've got some sort of, what is it? Lanier puts in some sort of Minbari battery or something.
Yeah, it's just an energy efficient, non-gas combustion or combustion engine, which makes it go faster, you know, run cleaner.
As we saw.
Yeah, and you can go right down the promenade into the different sections of Babylon 5 and just ride.
As long as it's empty. As long as it's empty.
Exactly. But the thing is that you're not like blowing a bunch of, like, you know, carbon monoxide, you know, into the atmosphere that needs to pump harder to clean the air.
Yeah. We can't be really doing that on a station where oxygen consumption logs are a thing.
Yeah. So it totally is, though. I think it was just a dig on kind of midlife crisis masculinity, I think.
Well, there was that whole video that Lanier is watching, right? Where they're like, yeah, this is a symbol of masculinity. And the freedom of the air, the wind in your hair, and all of that stuff. And Lanier is intrigued by it. So there is that element that you're touching on. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
I do find this one of the more unlikely things that people might remember in the future, but that's okay. We're not going to win them all, as we're going to talk about. Hold that comment, Terry. We'll get to it.
Yeah.
And I love John's comment where Baldi is in the Garibaldi name. So it was meant to be, wasn't it?
I guess so. Nice observation.
Yes. I did a long time ago a parody of Babylon 5, and nothing really came out of it, but this was 20-something years ago when I was in high school. I wrote a thing where it was a parody, and I changed the names of other characters, and Garibaldi was just Baldi.
And that's a good nickname. That would be funny if like someone, used that somewhere.
That's who he was. He was Baldi. G. Baldi.
All right, so what you got, Char? What's next?
Okay, I want to talk about baseball. Apparently, and this is how I envision it being in the future, baseball overtook footy or football or soccer, whatever you want to call it, as the game that dominates Earth sports.
Yeah, I guess like right now, as much as football, the NFL, or baseball, I'm not baseball, but the NBA, all of these hugely marketed sports, even the WWE, I mean, a lot of marketing dollars and a lot of TV contracts are tied up into this. There is no larger sport in the world than soccer right now.
Absolutely.
Like, just in terms of its mass appeal and mass viewership. Yeah.
Around the world, football is way bigger than it tends to be in the US. I mean, it's gaining traction here for sure, especially with the women's team kicking so much butt. They are amazing. But baseball seems to be the dominant thing in the future, and not just limited to Babylon 5. You've got baseball on DS9 as well.
Yep.
And so this is apparently a thing, and I can understand this one. I can see how maybe it happened where, I mean, baseball does have some popularity around the world. It's big in Japan, for instance. And so, as things change, maybe baseball just took over as the sport on Earth.
I don't really have a problem seeing this in the show because we don't see it overused. I mean, we do, it was like, it's a nice piece to kind of show the difference between Sinclair's style of meditation going into the Zen garden, or going into what is he usually in, CNC or the observation dome.
There you go.
And then you have Sheridan with batting practice. And that's his kind of like version of meditation.
Yeah, the one time we saw, I guess it's the field on Babylon 5, which makes me wonder, did they have like a team on the station, in their off hours? Is there some sort of softball game going on? Because I know in the off hours, the cast and the crew, they actually did have a softball, or was it baseball team? Terry, you probably know. And they would do that in their spare time, what they had of it. And so, I kind of wondered, does Babylon 5 have a baseball team, or do games come here? And there's so many references to baseball in Babylon 5, not just Sheridan hitting the balls in that one episode that we saw and then never saw it again.
Wasn't Sheridan Bear dressed in a baseball uniform?
I think he had the teddy bear. Yeah. He had the baseball cap and I think a baseball jersey that said JS. Sure. He mentions he wants details of the 6th game of the World Series when he gets his universe today. I think on more than one occasion, Garibaldi says, "Oh, lousy Dodgers."
Lousy Dodgers.
Apparently, the Dodgers are horrible in the future. That's a shame. And then there's another one. What? I'm trying. Okay, let me think. What is it?
You know what I would love to have seen while you're looking at.
Do it.
I would love to have seen how each of the ambassadors would have tackled how to wear a baseball cap when you really think about it.
For the Minbari and the Centauri males in particular, that would be difficult.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah. I think you'd have to have something specially fitted, especially for the Minbari for that bone.
That would have been so weird. And also it would have been an amazing attempt, right? An amazing attempt to try and design something that worked but was awkward at the same time.
Yeah, I would love to have seen a scene maybe where Delenn and Lanier are trying to put them on, and it's like they're not quite getting it right.
Well, I mean, think how funny it was with Delenn and the hair thing.
Right.
right? And now you got to stick a baseball cap on top of the hair thing.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right?
I pity them. I feel bad for them.
What was the thing that you were looking up?
I couldn't find it. I think
Yeah.
that was it. That was my notes. Not a whole lot there. Sorry. Terry says that it was softball that the cast and crew played.
Yeah, you know, baseball's a
So
little
cool.
aggressive. Softball's a little bit more, I think, more socially fun to play amongst friends.
Yeah, I think it's fun to play. I think it's boring a lot of times to watch, unless you're into like the real intensity of the World Series or something. But yeah, like a Sunday afternoon, just going out on the field and playing amongst some friends. Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, you know what? I think it's like it takes the bite out of the competition when you're not overhand pitching, when you're underhand pitching, and not with the velocity a professional softballer would throw.
Right.
Right.
That stuff's intense. Yes.
Yeah.
John Bowersocks has a great comment that tennis is a huge sport too. Apparently that didn't really make it. We never really hear a whole lot about tennis, at least on Babylon 5.
Well, from what I understand.
Oh, wait, no. Garibaldi's daughter played tennis.
She did, and she was a champion player. She was a championship player.
That's right. She got a trophy.
But from what I understand, and Terry, you might be able to correct me on this, that Babylon stations 1 through 4 did have clay tennis courts, but they were destroyed. They were too expensive to recreate on the. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm like, I don't know, really?
I just wanted Terry's ears to perk up. He's like, there were no tennis courts.
Well, actually, no.
I'm just winding you up, Terry. I'm having a go at you.
You wound me up. Okay, so we've talked about baseball. What else we got here? What's your next thing that you want to talk about?
Well, a couple things, and this is something that for me is always. It's always a kind of like a human thing, whether it's an American thing or, you know, a different culture. But mail is so important to us.
Yes,
the mail.
I'm so glad you put this on your list.
Right, and I have specifically, you know, examples of the Earth Force Post Office and just when people get mail. Now, again. Like in science fiction terms, like when you're dealing with, say, like Ender's Game had this technology where you could essentially talk to people in real time across vast distances of space. They call it the Ansible technology, where, you know, we all know that subspace takes a long time for a carrier wave to reach its destination, where entire generations of people could die out. But in this case, it was like instantaneous. That's great. But it's not as cool as hearing like, oh, all of a sudden someone got their mail dropped off by this shuttle carrier that came from Earth that was dropping off mail to all these different stations, you know, and then you get mail call. I love seeing like in war movies or in Westerns or in any kind of genre that I love seeing episodes that have to deal with mail call.
Yeah, and you know what? There is something incredibly heartwarming about receiving a package on your doorstep or whatever it is that I think will survive the test of time. We love that as human beings. It's like getting a little present. Even when you know what it is, it's like, oh, it's here. It gives you a little giddy feeling. And I particularly love that scene where Garibaldi is fighting with the postal worker. It's like, that's going to be 100 credits. And Garibaldi is just like, no, it's not. Well, you broke away from Earth. You tell me what's up.
Right. And I love it. He goes, it's got pepperoni, you know, the small kind, the thin kind, you know, and, you know, it's got olive oil, freshly pressed, you know, it was for his bagna calda.
Right. Another callback to something that I think is going to be just universally appreciated no matter what time. Food. Yo.
Sure.
Yeah. Those traditions, they're not going to leave us 100-some years from now. No way.
But at the same time, though, one of the things that I always found a little sterile, even though it's super great technology to think about, is in Star Trek, they use the replicator technology where, you know, it recombines atoms and molecules and turns them into from, you know, whatever the source was of those to something else, which is fine. You know, that's super cool technology to think about. But at the same time, though, I love how at least in Babylon 5's example, how they can taste the difference of something that's synthesized versus something that's real. And I love how, like, you know, a steak dinner is a big deal. Real coffee is a big deal. Real garlic, real anchovies, real Parmesan cheese, real olive oil. That's a big deal.
Yeah. And it's not the easiest thing to get, which is, I think, one of the most relatable aspects of this whole thing, where getting something fresh, like a chicken egg, when Marcus gave Ivanova bacon and eggs, people were freaking out. And they're like, how did you get that? Because that had to have been overnighted or something, to have that level of quality to where it didn't spoil. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great relatable thing because for us, yeah, it takes a couple of days, even with priority across the United States alone, to get something that quickly. Going through hyperspace, it still takes a few days. It's the same problem, just a greater distance.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, makes a lot of sense.
Do you think Amazon would survive into the future?
God, I hope not. I mean, I love the speed of Amazon, but the way they treat their workers right now is just such crap that, unless they really reform, I hope that somehow these massive big companies that just treat their workers like crap go away.
That's something that I really wish they would continue. That would have continued in Babylon 5 was the quality of life for the union workers that worked in the docks. Because by any other means necessary, everyone kind of like glosses over that. It's like, that's too mundane as a story. Blah blah blah. Union workers, union strikers. I'm like, no, that's a real human thing. Humans are working those docks for alien people, and that breeds the whole home guard night watch scenario. Because there's still this great xenophobia that exists in the future.
Right. Why are we working our butts off for these aliens who don't really care about what we're doing?
Right. I mean, essentially,
that horrible attitude.
One of those dock workers was killed because a Narn wanted to, or was it a Narn pilot that wanted to force his way into the station for the Jaquan F plant?
Right. So So are we breeding some resentment there? Yeah. And I mean, human nature being what it is, as sad as that is, it helps Home Guard make a good case, right? The us versus them mentality. So if humanity can come together, we have to have that other, the aliens, to hate collectively, I guess. At least this faction of humans feels that way.
I have something that I'd love for you to talk about for your next point.
What's that?
Because I don't think that this is solely an awkward topic to discuss just about Babylon 5's anachronism. I think this was pretty rampant in pretty much all 1990s science fiction, and that is fashion.
Oh God. Okay.
And I'm looking at you, Jake Sisko.
That's right. He inspired bus designs for seats everywhere. Yeah. Okay. Fashion on Babylon 5. It's not my favorite thing. It's in my notes. I'm not a fashion critic. I am not a fashion historian. I'm no expert by any means, but I truly hate fashion trends. For one, as a female, fashion designers do not give us pockets. Okay. This is a serious problem. As somebody who does not carry a purse, if it does not fit in my pockets, it does not come with me. This is problematic when you can't even put your car keys and your phone in your pockets. Okay? Fashion people, I'm talking to you. So there's this whole thing. There's the idea that they are bringing back just the dumbest crap all the time from past decades. I mean, bell bottoms have come back how many times? The 80s have come back how many times? I mean, okay, neon clothes. Yeah, they stand out. We know the drill. Can you think of something else?
Do you have anything specifically that just really stood out to you as a, why did you make that choice, in just in terms of, and I think.
Okay. In terms of Babylon 5, I have two things. One, the kind of abstract geometric Cosby sweater patterns.
Okay.
No. Especially in the whole light of what has happened with Cosby in recent years. Bad news. And then the second thing, the big kind of like Blossom-esque hats. This happened in the earlier days of Babylon 5, season 1 especially. People walking around the Zocalo with like bigger than Guinan hats and real big like kind of hammer pants. And it's like, no, it's not 1991. This needs to stop.
Also permy hair. Like super permy hair.
Yeah, perms never needed to be a thing. In my opinion. But again, I am an armchair critic. I'm not an objective critic. I just think this is awful. And so, this is my unprofessional opinion, but I feel like fashion design in these earlier Babylon 5 years is crap. It's horrible. They're trying to bring back things that just don't need to be.
The interesting thing especially about fashion and hairstyle really dictate when you can tell when a certain series was created.
Yeah. And
Right.
unfortunately, Babylon 5 does date itself, especially in those earlier seasons. Later on, I feel
Mhm.
like it does get better. It ggets just to be a little more, I guess, generic
Yeah.
in its
Yeah.
design, where, hey, that's fine. That's great. Timeless clothing is great.
Right.
But just the idea that like these trends keep coming back and they can't think of something new is just, I don't know, just gross. And it does date it because when I see a big hat, I'm thinking early 90s. I really
Yeah.
am.
Yeah.
I just
And
am.
the multicolored kind of like the spaghetti gun that hit the wall. You know, like
Sure.
everyone looks like a Jackson Pollock painting, right? Yeah.
Yeah, like it's sort of like how all the TV studios right now are rebooting every show ever made, right,
Right.
in this
Right.
decade. And
Right.
it's just like, can we do something else? Anything but this? I'm tired of it. I'm done.
But at least in well, I can't say that for sure because like it'll be interesting to see, say, The Expanse or the reboot of Battlestar Galactica or any of these shows like Orphan Black or things like that from a 20-year from now perspective and looking like, oh my god, I can't believe the hair looked like that. Oh my god, I can't believe the fashion looked like that. Because that's kind of like where we are right now. We're looking at it from 25 years ago or 25 years ahead of in the future
Yeah.
and looking back at the reruns and you're like, yeah, I mean, I'm telling you, and it's funny because John Bowersox makes a good point of this. He says, I saw an image of Jake Sisko and there was a bus seat that and said who wore it better.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
I guess that, not to fault like really like any of the like designers, obviously Johnny Iacovelli, I'm not going to fault him for it, but you kind of
Sure.
like you kind of deal with what you got to deal with at the time. And here's a huge anachronism that still bugs me to this day, more so than probably anything that I've ever seen in Star Wars. Okay. When they flee the Death Star and the Millennium Falcon just beat the 4 TIE fighters off that were chasing the Millennium Falcon. And then, Princess Leia says, there's no explanation for the ease of our escape. And then Han Solo goes, easy? You call that easy? And she says, they're tracking us. And he goes, not this ship, sister. When he says that, I'm like, that dates it all the way to the 70s. Just that word itself, because it's like, what's up, brother? What's up, sister? That was the vernacular of the time. And
Truth.
and I think that it's probably something that I don't know for sure, but I think that's maybe something that Harrison Ford just slipped in. And because it was a low budget movie, they were like, well, the scene was going well. We're not going to clip this out because it's going to cost us film and reshoots.
Sure.
So,
and I'm
he said
sure
it
they were
twice.
thinking, well, I mean, how big of a deal is it really? Again, it's maybe one of those things that where people at the time found it relatable.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
But now.
And then some people say like, well, he's just foreshadowing the fact that he's Luke's sister. Like he would know that how at the time?
Yeah, no. Nobody knew at that time.
Exactly. And he says it twice, so it's kind of like it is for me, sister, so I'm like, no.
Yeah.
That kind of anachronism bugs me. This kind of fashion stuff, where it could have been better, it doesn't really bug me that much.
I got the feeling that it bugs me a lot more than it bugs you.
Well, Jake's does.
Well, when you're a freaking bus seat, I mean,
it's
that's
just
bad.
It's just so obnoxious.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, I think they were trying to be futuristic, but a lot of times that can backfire.
Yeah. Well,
which is why I kind of like the more plain, abstract look that Babylon 5 eventually does go to.
Yeah, for sure.
Like when I'm thinking seasons 4 and 5, even 3, it's right on track with that. But seasons 1 and 2, yeah.
well, let me ask you this then. One last point on the fashion thing. So, what did you think about like the men's lapels? I mean, did you think that was a logical extension of what jackets look like now into the future? Do you think they would have lapels?
I didn't think that was that bad.
Yeah.
I thought that was okay. It was really more kind of like just like when there's a particular shirt I'm thinking of Garibaldi where it's very very kind of like several colors. It's very 1991.
Oh, yeah.
You'd expect Boys to Men to be wearing that on their album cover. Totally. There's that, and then there's a couple of times when Sheridan is wearing just lousy sweaters. A couple of the guest stars are wearing those lousy Cosby sweaters. In particular, I'm thinking Ivanova's ex-boyfriend.
Oh, yeah, sure.
In season 1, he's wearing a Cosby sweater. That alone is the red flag on him, much less anything else. But then, sometimes they made them look really good too. I mean, I'm particularly thinking Ivanova off duty. She looks gorgeous.
Because she's gorgeous.
Well, she is. But they didn't completely flub up her fashion. So,
No.
they got it about half right. Terry says that Talia's outfits were awesome. Yeah, she looked good. She was all right.
But she was always Psychor sharp. She was rarely out of context of being in the Psychor.
True. But nevertheless, I mean, it's not like they gave them seriously early 90s designs for a Psychor uniform or anything like that. So they didn't screw up entirely. It's just their leisure suits. Oof, no.
Yeah, they were a little rough. And one thing that actually does bug me, as much as I love the episode and as much as I love the character of the vicar, that hat that he wore was a little outrageous. The
vicar,
who? It was the guy. There was the guy that was recording Talia's fears.
Oh,
2 words: Crab Nebula.
That guy was such an oddball. He could have gotten away with anything.
That's true.
Yeah.
Anyway,
all right. Okay. Yeah. We should probably move on from fashion.
I would like to talk about something that I really like, and I'm really just glad it survived. Not just the Babylon 5 that as we know it, but kind of like way into the future, as we see in the deconstruction of Falling Stars, and that's basically ink, quills, and paper.
Paper will always live on. No matter how much we try to become a paperless society, all of our most important documents are printed on paper now, and in the Babylon 5 future, the same is true.
You know what the funny thing is that I was at work the other day, and I was backing up all of my stuff, and all of a sudden, someone says don't. Someone said to me, a coworker or one of my bosses says, just make sure that you always have all those hard copies backed up in a paper folder and stick it in a file cabinet. I'm like,
right?
Why do we do that still? Like, all these thoughts are kind of like,
you would think we wouldn't. In the 21st century, it's really not that necessary, and yet there is something so official about ink on paper that we have to have it.
There's a certain permanence to it. I think I was trying to find so many different things to describe this, but there's a certain permanence to when something is either written down or printed on paper. There is a tangible action of recording thought and idea and meaning and having that instantly shareable. But at the same time, though, aside from something that would destroy both data and paper at the same time, like fires or catastrophes or floods.
Sure.
It's not everything is trusted into this digital cloud that we think is like, the current trend of how to store data.
True. Well, here's another point.
Well, it's like I need to rebut this. I agree, Terry, that the paper on B5 isn't paper, but it's synthetic material. But Jacquard is.
That's some serious heavy parchment, no less.
Yeah, that is. We're
talking classic ink and quill, which I feel like any holy book should be written in first.
Exactly, and the ink. It's. I don't. Yeah. I mean, these are the kind of things where I love to have known. Like, does that come from a plant, a special religious plant? Knowing Jacquard?
Probably. Yeah. I would not be the least bit surprised. And honestly, paper and pen has survived hundreds of years already, and so it makes perfect sense to me that. One, we still would be doing very official documents with either ink and quill or at least on paper. Blah.
Well, think about it this way. Like in the future, when everyone's sitting around the council chambers, when you have the League of Non-Aligned Worlds in their bleachers, and then you have the ambassadors in their seats, and then Ivanova is passing out kind of like the declarations, that they have to sign, these contracts that they have to sign.
Yeah.
They're all in folders and they're all on paper. Why wouldn't they just use like a DNA retinal scan or something like that that's built into their console for that? It's like that's what I mean when she's like, she has this giant stack of folders. That's really kind of like a secretarial thing to do. Is like, here, sign your contract, sign your contract, sign your contract.
Sure.
As opposed to, and this goes all the way back to say, even Battlestar Galactica and Battlestar Galactica, the Ron Moore version, they make it a point that they're using paper because, like Terry Jones says, paper can't be hacked by the Cylons.
Sure.
So
absolutely. So, I mean, really, maybe paper is our ultimate backup. You've got the digital copy on file for quick reference, probably. You scan it in or something. Right. But yeah, there's I think it might be just a little bit harder to fake it on paper. Also, the studies have shown that when you physically write something to paper, your brain retains that information a lot better. So, college students, take note. If you actually take your notes on a pen and paper, as I did in the early 2000s, you're going to retain that knowledge much better than if you're just typing it onto a screen. The same applies as if you're reading a real paper book instead of on a screen. Our
Yeah.
brains, for whatever reason, just process it differently. And I've noticed that in my own life, where if I'm reading something on the internet, if I read a news article, I might remember it for a few days. And then after that, it's 50-50. When I'm reading a book, like I'm reading Joe's book right now, I'm remembering a lot of details, a lot more.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if I'm losing a little bit of that experience in not reading the book, but
Maybe.
the other thing that I wanted to talk about when it comes to the whole paper and anachronism of that is that at the end of deconstruction of, not the very end, but at the last sequence of deconstruction of falling stars, you're dealing with, the rebirth of kind of like humanity after the Great Burn. And then you had I think it was Brother Alwyn, who was the monk / ranger.
Uh-huh.
And they were talking, and then another monk disciple, he comes in and he starts talking about how he's lost faith in creating this illuminated manuscript. An illuminated manuscript. I mean, think about it. It's like the Great Burn bombed Earth all the way back into basically the pre-Renaissance age.
Right. The Dark Ages, essentially.
The Dark Ages, yeah. So
yeah. So, I mean, it makes some sense, right, that we still do have paper in the future, where maybe there have been some technological stumbles, where maybe you've lost a lot of data that can't ever be recovered for whatever reason. But if you have it on paper, it's at least committed there. That's a different way. I mean, you can, of course, destroy it, but maybe not as easily as data, maybe not as much in mass, which is maybe why a part of it lives on.
But I think it goes back to your point, which was really important to make, is that when you write something down, you retain it with a lot more attention. And that's where I think, because we all know that Brother Allen was talking to the Anlashak hierarchy, and he says that, remember, if you're going to leave something behind, make sure that it's in the right appropriate period. Gasoline engines didn't start, or whatever, something like that. So you know that they're still technologically advanced to the point where they don't need paper, they don't need ink, they don't need to create these illuminated manuscripts. But in recreating that part of their history, the history pre-burn, it almost reminds them that we have to create an entirely new history that looks like the history of old. J.R.R. Tolkien, he created the Lord of the Rings basically in the fashion of, if somebody found my text, it would have been the text of Old Britain as a mythology, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's what they were trying to get to, and that's why I think paper still exists. There's one other thing I wanted to pull up from another reference point.
Sure.
One of my favorite shows is Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah.
And there was a scene where one of the computer teachers has a run-in, Miss Calendar has a run-in with Giles, the librarian, who's also Buffy's watcher, Buffy's guardian. And he says the reason why he doesn't trust computers is because computers don't smell. And she's like,
I love that so much.
Right. And she says, what do you mean? It's like, books smell. Books have a certain smell. If you smell a book, right?
Oh, man. Yes. A new book smell is the best.
New book smell, bound leather cover. You can smell the ink, especially since he's a librarian. He knows, and he deals with a lot of ancient texts. So
sure. So then you've got kind of that old musty smell on top of that.
Right. I can tell you when that came out. I can tell you when that ink was created. I can tell you when that printing press was used on that. I can tell you how this was bound. I don't get that from just this blank slate of data that's created by a bunch of ones and zeros on a silicone screen.
That's such a good point. I think as human beings, and probably across all species, that sensory experience of the smell and the feel, we love that. That's important to us. There's something very special about that, which is why I think writing as a form of communication, is one of the most powerful things we could possibly do and have as a society. That's why it's going to live on.
Well, I'd like to have you segue that into the newspapers section.
Let's talk about newspapers, because Terry, you made a comment earlier where Newspapers in the future might have not been the most forward-thinking thing JMS did. But you know what? At the time, when I was first watching Babylon 5, I did think this was great.
Mhm.
We have to put this in context. In the 90s, journalism and the news industry, it was not the wreck that it is now. It had not collapsed. It was at an apex, actually.
Right.
So news companies were thriving, doing very well, and there was no prediction that that was going to change anytime soon because knowledge and information is power and journalism is a part of communicating that information. So
Mhm.
I loved it that they had real newspapers but with a futuristic twist
Yeah.
where you put in the old newspaper, it erases yesterday's news, puts the new customized edition together for you, and everybody gets their own little kind of version of Universe Today, whatever they choose to read, and then bam, that's it.
But why do you think that that particular detail was inserted? Was it because that Joe was like, I like reading the newspaper. I want to have like a newspaper scene in one of my shows? Because really, you could have, and this is like extrapolating the technology that we have now versus what we believe we would have in the future. And you can get everything on your Apple Watch now. I can read the
Right.
news, I can read texts, I can get phone calls, all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
So in the case of where we should be in terms of all the technology in Babylon 5, and I'm not talking about just human technology, I'm talking about Minbari, Narn, Centauri, all the major races and non-aligned worlds sharing technology, because that's what they were supposed to do.
Yes.
Why wouldn't you have that built into your,
Well, one, business.
Hmm.
But again, I'm thinking this might not be the most forward-thinking thing Joe ever did. He just thought that newspapers would live on as a form of, people loved and some people still do love their morning paper, the crispness of the page, the smell of the ink. I mean, Joe worked in news for a short while. I've worked in news as well. There is something to be said for that kind of format, even though it's so fast anymore. That's what I think he did not predict, is just how instantaneous our news is now. But I mean, it's a very 90s esque vision of news on
Sure.
Babylon 5. You've got kind of like the Dateline News magazine for the ISN specials. You've got newspapers. I don't know if anybody really saw the day when everybody would just expect their news to be free and newsrooms would be gutted. And maybe the closest thing as far as accuracy goes is the fact that ISN, it seems to be the one news source for people on a visual medium anyway, TV. Which we've seen the consequences of that when that happens, and that's no good. Although I think what I just occurred to me like right before the show today was that I wonder if JMS were writing this now, would he have two competing news channels, each with different forms of reality? He kind of did that with the Voice of the Resistance, but as we know, that didn't have as far-reaching of a thing as ISN. So would we have those two versions of reality competing as we do in today's world?
That's actually, maybe we'll just put that down for a next talking point. Like, what would have been changed if Joe were to do Babylon 5 now? Because like the papers, that's just something that was, you're right, it was very reticent of the 1990s, as a lot of these things are that we're talking about. It's not necessarily that they're anachronisms for their anachronism's sake. It's that he wanted to plug in certain touchstones of the 90s, of when he was telling that story, and make sure that he can connect with them, or that we can connect with them as an audience in the future. It helps humanize the story a little bit, where we can relate, like, okay, not everything has changed. But it's also interesting to see, like, even in 2000, when they did Enterprise, the fourth Star Trek spinoff, is that right? TNG, Voyager, Enterprise, that they were still using analog keys on the Enterprise, on the most sophisticated ship in Starfleet at the time. Whereas in 5 years time, we had the iPhone 3, which was basically touchscreen technology, which we were getting in the next generation already back in 1987.
Right. That's just how much our world has changed today.
Exactly. So
it's hard to think. I mean, I really don't envy the people who have to innovate what they think the future is going to look like, because who the frick knows?
Exactly. And you're looking at it in like how they're approaching their science fiction production design for, say, the Orville or the Expanse or any of these science fiction shows that are coming out, because sooner or later, people are always going to question, why are you using projectile technology, which I'd like to get to in a point.
Yeah.
Why are you using swords in the future? Why would you do that? You know, when a laser beam is so much more effective.
Right. But we also have a version of guns. We have our PPGs in Babylon 5, which are just
Right.
kind of an evolution of guns.
Right.
So it's the
Yeah.
same idea, but maybe a little different in its look. That's about it. Does the same thing.
And kind of like the lightning round to cover some of the things that we didn't get a chance to, we were talking about the slug thrower, Garibaldi's slug thrower.
Yes. Before we get into that, I remember the detail I was looking for earlier.
Okay, go for it. Yeah.
Sheridan wants detailed information of the 6th game of the World Series when he requests his customized universe today. That was the other baseball point I was trying to think of earlier.
So it ties into both baseball and newspapers.
Yeah.
And then Minbari today, Minbari's gossip column.
Ion Minbari.
Ion Minbari.
Ion Minbari?
Okay, but I understand there are always kind of like these attempts at different types of humor. And I understand where he was going with that. It's just that in doing so, in doing that, it kind of further humanizes Delenn, because that type of, I guess, vanity.
Right. Well, I need to know what your people are saying about my people.
Yeah, that's
I mean, that's a very human thing, right?
Could you imagine?
We want to know, even if it's horrible.
Yeah, could you imagine Facebook or social media in Babylon 5? Like what they're saying about Ivanova? And this, who would bring that up? Corwin would bring that up. He would be like the social media, like,
oh my God, would he be the troll that nobody knows is the troll?
He would be the guy that finds it and shows it to somebody and starts this entire brouhaha of social media.
Oh my God. I really think Corwin would be the guy to create the memes, but take no credit for it.
That would be funny.
It really would. And it would be Ivanova memes.
Could you imagine if like he was, like all of a sudden they had to do this investigation of like, someone created a meme and it created this entire smear campaign against Ivanova. And it turns out to be Corwin.
Oh my God.
But he didn't mean it,
Oh my God.
Because he's the guy that he's the guy that doesn't mean anything, but everything ends up becoming like askew in whatever intent that he had.
Oh my God, that would be incredible. Oh my gosh, her wrath would just be insurmountable. He would have to leave the station, which is why they probably didn't do such a thing. Because they did have email. I'm sure they had email forwards.
Oh sure. Oh my God, could you imagine a bad email forward from Garibaldi or somebody?
Oh God.
Or a techno mage doing that to somebody.
Oh, that's dangerous.
I mean, think about that. Think about like just and that's what techno mages couldn't hack. Going back to paper, they couldn't hack somebody's written diary.
Hack paper.
You can't hack paper.
Terry, that is the theme of the day. You can't hack paper.
That should have been the name of this episode. You can't hack paper.
I love it. Okay. What's the next thing we ought to talk about? You know what we ought to talk about? Daffy Duck.
That's right. Yeah, we haven't done that yet. And that's a big deal.
It kind of is. And I mean, the real life answer is because Warner Brothers owns those rights and it was an easy thing to plug. Mm-hmm. But why do you suppose Daffy Duck is on Garibaldi's wall in the future? Like, why of that, of all things, did that live on?
Well, I love that. I believe it was Jakar when he was investigating like what happened to Mr. Garibaldi, and was it him when they flipped on the light and they looked at Daffy Duck and it was the human god of frustration? Was that it?
Boy, I don't know.
Or the Egyptian god of frustration, something
like that. Okay,
yeah. But not just Daffy Duck itself, but Duck Dodgers. That was a big deal. Like Duck Dodgers in the 24th and a half century.
Yes. Where Delenn is eating popcorn for the first time. It's quite adorable.
Adorable. I love it. She looks at it. She's like, and he keeps nudging her and throwing popcorn in her lap. He's so into it. She's not sure what to make of the situation. It was like that true experience of where, she is an alien. She has no idea what this culture is about. It's great. Slice of Sci-Fi, thanks for joining us. Duck Dodgers that's confirmed. And then yes, when Zach and Jakar were talking about the missing Garibaldi. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Thank you for that confirmation. Yeah. So. Yeah, I don't know. I've always had this weird vision where Daffy Duck has a very specific
meaning to Garibaldi in particular. It's not necessarily like a pop culture thing in Earth society or anything like that. Like, I really don't think, sorry guys, I don't think Looney Tunes is going to live on that far in the future. A lot of stuff's going to get thrown away into the ether. I mean, come on. There is so much stuff in our day and age. There's a lot of crap, a few gems, and a few things are going to slip through the cracks. But you know what? I don't think this is going to be one of them. So it's got to be a very rare and a very personal thing to him.
But also the vids that survive the day. Now, it's an interesting thing because maybe everything that we see of Garibaldi really does inform us of a lot of his past and how much he clings on to his past. It's very important to him.
Sure.
I mean, as chief of security, he uses his influence to get things past security.
Right?
Right?
Yeah.
So he kind of breaks his own laws, but he does it for a very good reason. And he told Garibaldi, I mean, he told Franklin this. He's like, look, this is about me connecting with my father. Right? This is the only thing left I have of him. My father was a great cook, the best, you know, and I just, you know,
yeah.
So you have that, and that anchors him back. Now, maybe that's like, maybe Duck Dodgers is something that he used to watch with his dad when they were growing up.
Maybe so. And Slice of Sci-Fi says that everything that I said just a moment ago is pure sacrilege because Bugs Bunny is my spirit avatar.
I was on your side.
That's okay. You know what? If I'm outnumbered, so be it. Let me know. That's fine.
Yeah.
If I'm wrong, I can own up to that. That's fine.
If you took the aspect of cartoons themselves and if they would survive into the future, I still think they would. Especially because it would be.
I'm trying to think what would survive. And you know what? Maybe it would be those classic Looney Tunes just because they were among the first. That, Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, it would have been interesting if Steamboat Willie was, because that's kind of like public domain right now.
Sure.
You know, there are a couple of like a lot of like the propaganda cartoons that were like put in front of World War II movies to like bolster the sales of war bonds. Those things, you know, would have been used. A lot of Superman was used there. A lot of Max Fleischer from like the 1940s was used. And it would have been interesting if Joe wanted to fight for that, knowing how much he loves Superman.
Right? Yeah, I imagine it was a lot easier to get Daffy Duck, though.
Most likely. But it does make a lot more, I guess, a lot more sense when it comes to Garibaldi, because Garibaldi is such a wise ass.
Right? So it's a good fit.
I think
and therefore, that's why we got what we got.
But it's also one of those things you kind of like head scratch, like, why this? Why this guy that has so much, you know, so much that's heaped on his shoulders on a daily basis when it comes to the security of the station, battling alcoholism, you know, battling, you know, dust peddlers and down belowers.
Down below, yeah.
I think that he just needs something that cracks him up, you know, on end.
Yeah, everybody needs their thing to let go. And if it does have that endearing quality where it takes him back maybe to his childhood, memories of his father. We all have our nostalgic things, and that's just one of Garibaldi's. Yeah.
A couple of the Slice of Sci-Fi has a couple of interesting tidbits here I'd like to share.
Sure, go ahead.
So there's a reason Disney and WB have eliminated copyright regulations. They legally made it impossible for creators to regain their rights. Copyrights used to last 75 years because Mickey Mouse was almost out of copyright back in the 80s. Again, going back to what they call public domain use.
Yep.
Disney lobbied the courts to rip those rights back. I think it's 99 years after the death of the creator for art copyrighted after 1973 or something. Now art owned by corporations will be retained forever because corporations are people now. Interesting.
Yeah, that's been a very big fight. Yeah, really. Mickey Mouse should have been public domain a long time ago, but Disney has so much power that they've fought it and fought it and fought it forever. And they always will, because could you imagine Mickey Mouse in the public domain?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
And in that way, in that internet way.
Yeah. And I mean, a part of me doesn't blame them, and then another part of me is just like,
well, I think that's nice. It's nice that the material that is there in the public domain, like classical music or classical writing, you know, Shakespeare, or in this case in Babylon 5, a lot of the Tennyson that they use with Sinclair and Catherine Sakai when they're going back and forth, you know, with classical writing. Stuff like that, you know, it also is very endearing when it comes to being an anachronism, because it does anchor us to a more, I guess, educated or civilized part of our past, where that, and especially when it comes to something like Shakespeare would evolve, it would continue all the way on into the future, or classical
Sure.
music, like Mozart or Bach or Beethoven.
Right. Yeah, and you know what? Those things will probably live right on into the future as well. They've lasted this long. I suspect they're going to continue. All right, we don't have a whole lot of time.
So super lightning round. I just want to kind of take a look at stuff. So I do like the fact that Garibaldi had a revolver, a gun.
Sure, we talked briefly about that.
Slug thrower. Let's see. Daffy Duck, 90s fashion, coffee, ink and quill.
We didn't talk too much about coffee.
A little bit. I
mean, it's been consumed by humans for centuries upon centuries. I don't suspect that's going to die off anytime soon.
Now it's just the fact that it had to be done illegally on Babylon 5, at least.
At least with the live coffee plant. Sure. That's kind of the nice, fun twist.
Yeah.
Again, it's that whole thing, freshness.
Exactly. Like freshly squeezed orange juice.
Right?
Oranges. Or fresh oranges.
Frickin' oranges.
Right?
Janet Greek. Oranges. Yeah. Yeah. Some things are just going to be consumed by humans forever. Things like coffee, vodka, oranges. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any kind of that'd be an interesting thing to talk about in a later show. It's like, what do you think that the technology of today right now would have survived in a different form in a real Babylon 5 that happens in the 2200s? Because when you're thinking
technology?
Because like where do our phones go to the next stage? I mean, what really changed?
I guess it's the comlink, but our technology now can do so much more than that.
Right. So that's like, where would that go? I would love to if we always talk about rebooting Babylon 5 or recasting Babylon 5, but let's talk about reproducing Babylon 5.
Oh boy.
Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, the way I justify it and rationalize it in my head is that through things like war and various problems that humanity goes through over the years, is we kind of do like a 2 steps forward, 1 step back thing, where we advance so far, then we regress, then we advance a little further and regress. And that's why a lot of the technology on Babylon 5 is a little more advanced in a lot of ways than what we have now. I mean, we don't have space travel the way they have it, but certain things like the comlink doesn't have half the power of an iPhone watch, or for instance.
I wish I could wear my watch with a biogenetic attachment to it, so I don't have to use a band. It would be so cool just to slap it on there, and no one else can use it because it reads my DNA.
That's going to be the next thing, dude.
That's what I'm talking about. That's like the whole thing. Like, where do you take that? What we know about Babylon 5 now, then in the 1990s, what we know about technology now.
That's a future topic for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But next week, we really need to talk about Straczynski.
Totally. Absolutely. That's definitely next week's topic.
Yeah. If you're midway through like I am, I'm going to finish up this week. I'm going to be ready for Sunday morning, and let's talk about this in depth.
Yeah. Come hell or high water, I'll be done.
Same.
I don't want to rush through, but at the same time, though, it compels you to read it. And here's the strangest thing.
That's just it, man. It's so good. I mean, I've not wanted to put it down. I've just been so damn busy, but I do read a little bit before bed every single night, so I'll get through it.
And not in a spoilery kind of way, but I do think that in this case, in his book, truth is definitely stranger than fiction.
Oh my God, his story. I didn't know the half of it.
I mean,
any lesser person would have succumbed to. Oh my God. I mean, okay. No. I can't do it. We've got to wait until next week.
But it would make for a great movie.
I could do this all freaking day, but you know what? We shouldn't. That's what next week is for. It's going to be a jam-packed hour. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So please join us next week.
So much to talk about. Oh my God.
For Becoming Superman.
Wow. Yeah. I'm looking forward to it already. It's good to be back too. I missed you, Norm. I missed our interaction with our listeners. Thank you everybody for joining us. This has been a lot of fun. And if we didn't talk about something that you wanted to hear based on like the anachronisms of what we saw in Babylon 5 and what you saw and what we didn't mention, please let us know. You can always get in touch with us. We have all the different social media contacts down there. We're on Twitter and Instagram at ZocaloCast. You can always join us on the Facebook group, and you can always join us here on YouTube and watch all of our other shows. I was looking at, I was doing our notes, and I think we're somewhere closing in on the year mark, somewhere around the mid 40s. So Yeah, September is when we started last year.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's
Yeah.
happening so fast. That's next month.
I know. Crazy, huh?
What?
I know. We're in the August.
What the hell is happening, Norm? I don't understand.
Time moves. Just time moves.
You know,
Right?
the old adage, the older you get, the faster time goes. It's so true.
Something like that. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, there was
Man.
I was on another Facebook page and advertising the show, and somebody said to me, like it's been 20 years since any real Babylon 5 content has been put out there. What could you possibly have to talk about?
Have you seen the show?
But since like
I mean,
that's
it's more relevant than ever. What do you possibly have to say to that?
Yeah, that's what I
If
said.
you don't understand, no explanation is necessary because none will do.
Yeah. I said that there are a variety of things. This is what we do. There's a variety of things that you can talk about, especially when you're kind of like overlaying it on today's political situation. But also,
oh my God,
I always feel that as time moves, and when you're a fan, as time moves and you move along with it, the show itself stays in a fixed point, but your perception of the show changes.
Oh, absolutely. As you grow
Right?
and change as a person, what happens to you in life alters your perception of what you see on the screen. It changes it for sure.
Right.
It has to. I mean, if you really are changing as a person, if you have completely arrested development, okay, fine. There's a show for that, by the way.
Right. But
yeah,
also,
yeah.
And also understanding and going back to becoming Superman is that your perception of Babylon 5 will change when you rewatch it after reading Becoming Superman.
Most definitely. And you know what? I'm really looking forward to that. Psychologically, I'm going to be looking for what part of Joe is in the show episode that I'm watching at that particular point, and then how does that thread into the story at large? And I'm saying that as somebody who hasn't even gotten to the Babylon 5 portion of the book.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. One last thing is like, because Slice of Sci-Fi came in late, I wanted to answer this question. So did they also ask why people keep talking about Star Trek, Star Wars, or Batman? I understand that point. It's just because Star Trek, Star Wars, or Batman are continuing to put out new content. Right. And Doctor Who as well. Like, remember, Doctor Who still has new content. Jodie Whittaker is the new Doctor.
Hell yeah.
Star Trek has Discovery and now Picard. So what I guess that person was alluding to is that Babylon 5 has not put out any new content since Lost Tales.
It's true. And that was back in 2007, and it wasn't necessarily widely received. Babylon 5 has never gotten its due, in my opinion.
That's why we're here.
But that is why we're here. We are here to spread the good word. And you know what? The thing is, though, is that yes, it is kind of like a blink in a moment of time, right? Where Babylon 5 was this thing and it's been gone for a long time now, but it is so good that it deserves to be recognized for what it is. And you know what? There's always a glimmer of hope. Hope is all we have, that maybe someday Babylon 5 will live on in some way, shape, or form, either in a new show or just simply a revitalization, as we've been going through for, gosh, at least the last year, where new people are discovering the show because of new avenues to watch it. Either way, the show's doing okay. A lot of other shows produced in the 90s don't have the level of exposure Babylon 5 does.
Right.
They're going to fade off into the ether, and very few people are going to remember them. They're not going to live on. Now, people like us and the people who are watching the show, we know that we're going to carry this show for as long as we freaking live.
Amen to that.
It'll keep going on. We keep on keeping on.
Abso-frackin-lutely.
Damn it. You know what? That's a great note to show damn it. Okay, the brewery. Wow. I can't speak no more. I'm done. I'm done. Bye.
So anyway, thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you next Sunday. And we have a fantastic topic for you. We're going to be talking Becoming Superman. So if you can finish it up, that'd be great. If not,
please do.
Then there will be spoiler alerts throughout the course of the show as we
all over. And you know what? You can wait until you're done. It'll be there waiting for you.
Absolutely. So until next time, be seeing you.